I always like to give my guests a chance to ask me any questions, because I love answering questions, and I rarely get asked questions, and so I would love if there's something that you would like to hear from me about. I would love to share that with you. So, do you have any questions for me, brother?
Yeah, I do actually. And it came up while you were talking about reading Dr. King's book, um, and and when you raised your thoughts about the idea of Black Power. Um, and I'm going to extend this a little bit to talking about not just Black Americans, right? But any any racial group of people or an ethnic group of people, right, who are not in positions of power, and who are fighting for freedom, for liberty, for sovereignty, for basic human rights. And correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of something what I heard you say was um, that part of the difficulty in talking about the idea of Black power is that Black Americans don't currently have power, right? And you see difficulty um, in Black Americans gaining the power necessary to make the kind of changes that perhaps one can assume um, groups that kind of um, look to Black power as a goal, some obstacles and difficulties that they might have because they're not in power. Did I understand that correctly?
Kind of. I guess the only adjustment that I would make to what you said is that it's not really about that we presently don't have power. There's no future in which we have the power to control the racial hierarchy. There's
Okay.
no past, present, or future that exists where that is a thing that will happen. So it's um it's more, it's not even aspirational. You know what I mean? Like, it's not even aspirational. It's pure fantasy. So like, and in my opinion, it's not where the solution to our problems lie. It's we're not gonna overpower racialized like whiteness. Like that is not how we win per se. You know what I
Right.
mean? Or achieve equality, if you will. Ultimately, what it is it has to be a multiracial, multi-ethnic community of people who together reject these human hierarchies that are pure fantasy. And the problem is we've never been able to create that because of the segregation that's been imposed on us, because of the power dynamics as they exist, where people are rewarded for continuing to perpetuate white supremacy.
Mm.
So, under that scenario, black power basically means, right, that black people try to gain power amongst themselves, right? But the history of us doing that is one tainted with violence. Whenever black people, even if they're just minding their own business, right, like creating their own communities, then Black Wall Street happens. Then Philadelphia happens. So
Right.
like they will drop bombs on us. They will shoot us. They will destroy our land and salt the earth, right? And so we've seen it time and time again. I don't think it's a realistic path forward because the way the racial hierarchy was composed and created, it has created this fear of black power. And that fear will always win out under the scenario we have. We have no way of showing that black power without implicating that fear and causing a violent reaction. And
Yeah.
and that's going to happen no matter what, ultimately, right? But I think it does matter how it's implicated, right? How that reaction comes into being, and because ultimately, right, if we inspire it just by existing and being successful, then you know, I mean, it's gonna happen no matter what we do, right?
Right.
Because there's this whole illusion of meritocracy that like, oh, you get what you deserve and what you earn, and if you do the right things, then you're going to be rewarded. But we know that that's not true in the race context.
Right.
That black people, especially, we talk about it all the time in our community. Our success is not looked upon favorably. People want to obliterate our success. They want to pretend like it was undeserved. They want to pretend like it's impossible, because believing that reinforces what they already believe about the racial hierarchy.
Mm.
So ultimately, the more we push against these people's fantastic beliefs about us, the
Mhm.
more they're going to push back, and they have the power to push back, and they'll always have more power than us. And that's why Dr. King really focused on the love aspect, which was considered to many to be perceived as weakness, But
Mhm.
Dr. King always said, right, like, that is not true. That's not how love actually operates. That's not what love actually is. Love is the strongest power out there. It's the strongest power in existence. It's stronger than hate. It's stronger than anything. And so he said that false perception of love is one of our biggest obstacles to
Mhm.
deal with. And, that's how he lived his life, right? Showing how you can still be powerful and still lead with love. And that's kind of what I try to do as well.
Yeah. No, and I actually, I've been, that resonates a lot with me. Um, I, for a long time, kind of also bought into the societal idea that that love is weakness, and that in the face of hate that's backed by that has power behind it, love is weak in the face of that hatred. But I think a lot differently now. I tend to wholeheartedly agree with Dr. King, but I do have questions about it. I do have questions about it because while I believe that love is the most powerful force, I think how it shows up um, is also important. Having these conversations is really important. But in the end of the day, um, if the goal is to get those who are already in power to see those who aren't as human beings, I think that's a great goal. But I also think it's a difficult one. And I'm curious about what we've been talking about right now in terms of your perspectives on the role that um, governmental power plays, right? Or the roles that the power of societal institutions play in achieving the goal that you're talking about, right? Um, because I think it looks like it's a very hard, impossible task, but I don't believe it to be so. Yet at the same time, I think that I guess the question is what's after the conversations? That's the question,
Yeah.
right?
I
Right?
mean,
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
let me
what's after the conversations?
Yeah, I don't think that it's like a before and after, right? Like, I mean, I think it's I always talk about racism as a multidimensional problem that has to be attacked from many different angles. The
Yeah.
conversation I find to be one angle, right? Creating
Mhm.
space for people to dialogue about this issue, to explore their own thoughts and feelings about it, because those spaces don't really exist. And how can
Well,
you expand your thinking on the issue if it doesn't
yeah.
exist? So that's one part. In terms of the government aspect, um, I'll tell you, just this is just my personal perception of it. I see government as an obstacle to anti-racism. I don't think the United States government or most of the local governments have chosen to actively fight against racism.
Mhm.
And so I see all of these institutions as obstacles that I have to work around.
Mhm.
Even if I'm working with them, I'm considering them as working around them.
Mhm.
So, and I would say about what Dr. King would say about it and what he wrote about was, and what he did through his protesting and through his movement was bending these institutions, including the government, to his will. Using the power of love. How did he do that? He used the power of economics. He used the power of humanity. He used the power of the media to show the brutality that racism and the violence that racism inevitably creates. And he showed that to the world. And he spoke on it to the world. And then he crippled local economies. Um, you know, and that is what made a difference for the institutions, for the government. The government was forced to act because money speaks, especially in the United States. This place, people worship money, here. So
Yeah.
ultimately, he was like, that's how we have to do it. We have to force the governmental powers through leveraging our economic power, which, while it may be small compared to the whole of the economy in America, it's still enough to bring a locality to a halt.
Mhm.
And so, building that communal power, getting a multiracial group involved in being willing to exercise that power and the sacrifices that entails, because it does involve sacrifice,
Mhm.
that's the next step to me, is to build that coalition of people who have enough money to influence the institutions that rely on those funds to continue to perpetuate racism or exist.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for answering that. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the thoughtfulness to your answer and just to how you thought about this.